Now there will be a panel discussion on a common problem we encounter in our day-to-day practice, approach to vertigo. I request moderator Dr. S.K. Somani, consultant neurologist, to come up on the stage. Dr. S.K. Somani. Is Dr. Somani there? Achha. I request panelists Dr. Aftaf Khan, consultant interventional cardiologist and electrophysiologist, Apollo Multispeciality Hospital, Kolkata; Dr. Vaibhav Sheth, consultant neurologist, Apollo Multispeciality Hospital, Kolkata; Dr. Sunil Jalal, consultant otorhinolaryngologist; and Dr. Annapurna Patwari, consultant radiologist, to come up on the stage. Dr. Somani, Dr. S.K. Somani is here. I request Dr. Somani to come up on the stage as moderator. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. Dr. Vaibhav Sheth. Dr. Vaibhav Sheth. Yes. Dr. Vaibhav will join soon. He is in the. Yes. We are calling. You just start. Dr. Vaibhav is coming.
বলে দিও বাবা কোথায় আছে কোনটা আপার
হ্যাঁ স্যার এটারই ফার্স্ট
কোনটা কোনটা উপরে এটা নিচে তো এটা উপরে ব্যাস ওকে একজন নিউরোলজিস্ট আসুন আর একটা পয়েন্টার হবে পয়েন্টার হবে এদিকে দেখো সুরে আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে আর এটা হ্যাঁ আমি করে ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে Should I begin or we wait for the neurologist to come? Okay. So this is the session on vertigo, and it may make you feel you vertiginous, but I'll take pains to make it as palatable as possible. Vertigo is a common neurological disorder that we encounter in our day-to-day practice. It is characterized by an abnormal sensation or illusion of movement that lasts for seconds to minutes. Associated symptoms are there, nausea, vomiting like that, and the general mechanism is disruption of the vestibular pathways. Vertigo must be distinguished from me too, or such as lightheadedness or faintness or a sensation of passing out that lasts for seconds to minutes and are usually associated with visual changes such as graying of vision, blackouts, and the general mechanism is transient reduction of cerebral perfusion. If it is associated with loss of consciousness, we call it syncope, otherwise it is pre-syncope. And the third meteor that we should consider is disequilibrium, which is the difficulty in maintaining balance. If you ask the patients carefully, they will tell you that the problem is in the legs, not in the brain. And it may be associated with frequent falls, but there are no loss of consciousness, which otherwise would suggest syncope. And it is due to sensory deficit in multiple modalities. This is the traditional way of teaching. There has been a paradigm shift, and I'll tell you later about in the last slide. I am not going to tell you about the anatomy. I'll tell you only the brief clinical facts that are useful in clinical diagnosis. These are on the left-hand side, this is the diagram of the inner ear showing the three semicircular canals, superior, posterior, and horizontal. And these are the two otolithic organs. The clinical importance of this is that if you watch this posterior semicircular canal, it opens into the utricle. It is in the most dependent part. And this is the reason why BPPV, which is the most common disorder causing vertigo, affects the posterior semicircular canal. The sensation, spatial sensation of vestibular system travels down the superior and inferior division of the vestibular nerve and is joined by the cochlear nerve, which this is the cochlea, it subserves our hearing functions. And therefore, they may be involved together and we may have vertigo as well as hearing problem in the ear. And it is also in close relation to the facial nerve, and which may also be affected. And I have cases showing these, highlighting these problems. And on the right-hand side, the impulses from the vestibular nuclei, they travel to the brainstem, pons and medulla, vestibular nuclei located there. And up to this is the peripheral part, and from this begins the vestibular nuclei. If you look at the connectivity pattern of vestibular nuclei, it goes to the brainstem, the third, fourth, sixth cranial nerves. It is related to the autonomic centers, and it is also sending impulses to the limbs through vestibulospinal cord. What I want to highlight from this diagram is that the vestibular system, the visual system, and the proprioceptive systems, they work together in a finely coordinated manner, and brain interprets this sensation as a normal one. If any of these three are affected, then brain will interpret it as balance problem or vertigo, and which may be associated with nystagmus, oscillopsia, nausea, vomiting, palpitations, or unsteadiness of gait. This is the idea of presenting this diagram. So the most important common cause of benign is the benign paroxysmal vertigo. The second one is Meniere's disease. Benign paroxysmal we always come across in our practice, sudden onset of vertigo associated with vomiting and all. It is triggered by change of position, either to one side or when patient sits up or turns in the bed. And it lasts so long as the position is maintained. And this is one of the most common cause. And the others are Meniere's disease. How to remember Meniere's disease? There is a mnemonic TVS, episodic tinnitus, vertigo, sensory neural hearing loss. And to this, if you remember, there is what is called sudden falls or Tumarkin's otolithic crisis. This is also probably a relatively common cause. And perilymphatic fistula, it is at times seen with barotrauma or head injury, barotrauma as in scuba diving, and it is associated with nausea, vomiting, etc., the vestibular symptoms. And one important feature is that these symptoms may be precipitated by loud noise, sneezing, etc. That is called Tullio's phenomenon. Coming to the vestibular nerve, the vestibulocochlear nerve, vestibular neuritis is a relatively common but benign condition. And acoustic neuro, vestibular schwannoma, I'll discuss this. We will discuss it later during case presentation. And the third is the herpes zoster oticus or the Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. It is basically infection of the 7th and 8th cranial nerves by herpes zoster. Just we have herpes zoster ophthalmicus. We also have herpes zoster oticus. It is characterized by Bell's palsy, hearing impairment, ear pain, and herpetic vesicles over the pinna and the ear canal. Coming to the central causes, they are far more uncommon but far more dangerous, and they may be vascular and non-vascular. And the vascular causes, lateral medullary syndrome, and cerebellar infarct or hemorrhage. And among non-vascular, vestibular migraine is a cause of concern for us. A good thing about vertigo is that we can diagnose it by history and physical examination. We first must confirm that what the patient is saying is vertigo, and the illusory or abnormal sensation of motion should always be asked for. Patient may complain of floating sensation, swimming, or being dragged to the ground, or rotational sensation. More important than this symptom is the time course, duration and episodic, or it is continuous. That is, we should determine, and we must find out the triggers. And these are easily found out from the history. Change in position as in BP, VV, or trauma, coughing, etc. in Meniere's disease. Remember, all the cases of vertigo of any cause, they will be aggravated by change of posture or movement. But it is BPVV, benign positional vertigo, in which the symptoms are triggered by the change of position or movement, and it goes away if we lie still and don't adopt that position. And you must ask for associated symptoms. If there is hearing loss, tinnitus, we suspect Meniere's disease, headache, photophobia, migraine, and we must also ask for concurrent or prior neurological symptoms to exclude stroke, posterior circulation stroke, or multiple sclerosis. And there are certain symptoms such as tilt illusion, drop attacks, and oscillopsia. Oscillopsia is patient is okay when he is sitting, but as he starts walking, he sees the entire movement moving around to and fro, and he has blurring of vision only during walking or motion. And above all, never forget to ask 5 dangerous Ds: dizziness, dysarthria, dysphagia, diplopia, and dysmetria. And we often call it ominous pentad of vertigo. And ask for the medical history also. Regarding examination, we should note pulse, whether there is any irregularity, look for anemia, and look for orthostatic change in pulse or blood pressure. Focused examination should include ear examination, which is usually normal, and a thorough neurological examination is required, and that will be evident in the case presentation. And another is the Hintz test. It is a very simple test: head impulse, nystagmus, and test of skew. In head impulse test, we ask the patient to look straight at our nose and turn the patient to side by 20 degrees, and look for any nystagmus or change of position in the eye. Nystagmus we can test for by asking the patient to look straight ahead and to the side, right or left. Look for any nystagmus if it is in the same direction, or there is bidirectional or direction changing nystagmus, or there is any abnormal type of nystagmus, that will indicate a central cause. And test of skew, ask the patient to look straight and cover one eye, then the other eye, and see whether there is any change in the position of the eye. We call it Catch-up-Saccard. But just it is for a general physician, it is important that whether there is some movement of the eye or not. This is the Hintz examination, and it is indicated when a patient presents with prolonged vertigo. And another is the disc Hallpike. It may sound a bit tough, but it is easier to perform. Explain the procedure to the patient. The patient sits up, turn the face to 45 degrees, lower the head of the patient 20 degrees below the edge of the table, and look for any nystagmus. This Hallpike maneuver is indicated in when a patient presents with brief recurrent vertigo. It would be unusual for the requirement of both the tests in the same patient. Blood tests are routinely not helpful, and audiometry, MR, angiography, etc. are done to exclude central, when we suspect central cause. To sum up, this is the important slide. Vertigo is no longer considered a part of dizziness. It is now an independent entity in itself. If you find that vertigo from the history, try to group the disorders into these 4 categories. If there is recurrent episodes of vertigo lasting seconds to minutes and it is triggered by movement, it is probable diagnosis. And if the disc Hallpike is positive, then it is confirmed. If the patient presents with recurrent episodes lasting minutes to hours, these are the 2 possibilities. And if the patient has TVS, there is recurrent tinnitus, vertigo, and sensory neural hearing loss, and low frequency loss in audiometry, this is the diagnosis. Otherwise, if everything is normal, we consider probable vestibular migraine. Third category is a single continuous episode lasting days to hours. And the possibility will be vestibular neuritis. And I have a case, we will discuss it later. And if the patient has continuous vertigo, if he has an abnormal hinge test, then we consider, and if the patient has that 5 dangerous Ds, then we will consider a central etiology where MRI, A, etc. are indicated. So this is the brief introduction to, and now the cases. The first case is to my learned ENT colleague, Dr. Sunil Janal. So this is the case. A 47-year-old female, there is no medical history, presents with sudden onset of severe rotatory vertigo with nausea and recurrent vomiting when she got up in the morning. She found no relief in any position, but noticed that on turning to right, she has more severe vertigo. It continued for hours, 6 hours or so, and with gradual settlement over 1 week. It was associated with unsteadiness of gait. She needed help in activities of daily living. There was no nystagmus, no tinnitus. Tinnitus, no hearing deficit, no dysphagia, dysarthria, or visual disturbance. On inquiry, she gives a history of fever of up to 102 degrees Fahrenheit with cough and cold, lasting for 3 to 4 days, about 2 weeks back. The head impulse test is positive. On turning the head to right, she showed catch-up saccade to the left. And there was no bidirectional nystagmus, no skew. MRI was normal. So Sunil, what is your diagnosis?
Hello. So most likely it is acute vestibulopathy of one side. So it's a vestibular neuronitis. Vestibular neuronitis will be the clinical diagnosis for this patient because it is a history of, there is a history of viral infection. She had fever 7 days.
I'll ask the question later.
Yes, sir.
Clues in the history. You have rightly pointed out, instead of saying directly vestibular neuritis, he said it is vestibulopathy, so that you don't miss the diagnosis. So vestibular vestibulopathy, he has said, and vestibular neuritis is the diagnosis. Now, what are the clues in the history for vestibular neuritis?
This patient had continuous giddiness for 1 week time, which was aggravated with the change of position also. And she had a history of
Yes.
fever, but no hearing loss.
Yes.
So, and no neurological deficits.
No
So
deficit,
that
yes.
suggests vestibular neuritis.
Neuritis, yes. How will you confirm? What is the differential?
So differential, we have to differentiate with the another acute symptoms with the giddiness, like we can rule out by the history, like BPPV. So BPPV will present with seconds only.
Seconds only.
So this
Yes.
is continuous. Then labyrinthitis will be top in the list. So labyrinthitis patient will have associated hearing loss also.
Hearing loss, yes.
So And again, the Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, there again, there will be a facial nerve palsy.
But in Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, there are other telltale features: Bell's palsy, herpetic vesicles,
Yes, sir.
etc., and severe ear pain, which is not a feature
Yes,
of
sir.
vestibular
And,
neuritis.
we can rule out the central pathology or posterior circulation, the stroke by the patient.
Yes,
Hints,
that is
Hints was
important.
positive.
Hints, yes.
Yeah, so
Hints
it
was
positive.
negative in this case.
No, sir, hit was positive.
No.
Head impulse was positive in the.
Head impulse was positive, and a positive test is reassuring. It favors a peripheral cause,
neuritis.
benign cause.
Yes.
If it were negative, and if it were associated with bidirectional nystagmus or positive test askew, then it would have favored a central pathology. Yes.
sir.
And how to confirm it?
So it's a clinical diagnosis only, and we can do clinical examination, head impulse test. We can do video head impulse test. We can do VNG. We can do imaging like MRI is done. We can rule out central pathology or posterior circulation stroke. I think that's all.
That
it
is
required.
okay. And how do you
Audiogram we can
treat-
do to confirm
Okay.
the no hearing loss.
What do you expect in the audiogram?
Audiogram will be
you
normal,
expect
sir.
an
In these
ICP
cases, they don't have
normal,
any
yes.
hearing loss.
So what is the treatment?
So treatment for vestibular neuritis is symptomatic, and because it is inflammatory pathology, so we should give a short course of steroid. So we can give a prednisolone, 1 milligram per kilogram body weight for short duration, like 5 to 7 days we can give, if it is not contraindicated.
Steroid.
And, yes, sir.
Anything else?
Then we can give a vestibular suppressant we can give.
Okay,
So
anything?
we can give sedatives also we can give. So and then
Is
we can
there
give
any role
vestibular
of-
rehabilitation we can start.
Any
after
role
2
of
days.
acyclovir
Acyclovir is not recommended
recommend?
because though viral pathology is there, but it's not
It
showing
is
any
not
sig-
proven.
Yes,
Yes.
it's not proven.
And how long should the vestibular sedatives be used? What is the recommendation?
Sedative usually just to suppress the symptom to make patient comfortable.
How long?
Maximum
Duration?
Maximum 2 to 5 days.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. This is I think we're running short of time, so I'll move on to the second question. And this is for our cardiologically, Aftab. So this is a 30 years old lady, no significant medical history. She is polymenorrhagic for 4 months. She has symptoms of tiredness, fatigue, anorexia. She has recurrent palpitations. She has dizziness, graying of vision, tendency to fall, especially on arising from sitting position. She is so symptomatic, she is reluctant to move even at home and unable to attend household chores. So what is the diagnosis, likely diagnosis?
Yeah, so this is a young lady who I assume is not on any medications, has a history of polymenorrhagia, and has postural symptoms of most of lightheadedness. So I think syncope or pre-syncope is a more likely diagnosis rather than vertigo, because in vertigo you get a feeling of spinning of the entire of your surroundings, whereas here it's more of lightheadedness that you'd get up with a pre-syncope. And since it seems to be more postural when she's getting up from sleep, I think an orthostatic hypotension would be something that I would probably consider first. And probably the anemia would be a contributing factor for her symptoms.
So you highlighted the clinical clues also. What is the important bedside test in such cases?
So I think a simple thing would be you would want to check her blood pressure in the supine and the standing position. So I think,
after how many minutes?
What is usually recommended is that you make her lie down, check her pressures, then get her up, and at the end of 3 minutes, or there are some people who say that you should even do it at 1 minute, but I think 3 minutes is a good time where you look at the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure. So if there's a drop of more than 20 systolic or a 10 diastolic blood pressure, that itself is confirmatory for an orthostatic.
And there is
hypotension.
something called immediate orthostatic
Yes.
hypotension less than 15 seconds and delayed after 10 minutes or so.
Yes.
Okay. So how do you confirm?
Yeah, the confirmation again, as you said, it is mostly a bedside diagnosis. But again, if you really have to confirm, especially with the delayed type, which can be a mimic for the depressor sort of cardiogenic syncope, then what we do is a head-up tilt-table test, and that sometimes can be helpful for us to diagnose what is happening.
And if the audience, if they are alert, I'll ask one question. Dr. Gupta asked me to ask questions to the audience also. What is the most common endocrine cause of polymenorrhagia? Most common endocrine cause of polymenorrhagia. Hypothyroidism, perfect. Everyone, some people are at least awake. So this is the case for Dr. Vaibhav Seth, our learned neurologist. So this is a 61-year-old male. See, he has a history of hypertension, diabetes, dyslipidemia. He is a smoker, 10 per day. And he admits to having occasional alcohol. He presented with sudden vertigo on getting up in the morning. He was veering to the right on going to washroom, and returned from the washroom. He found that he has difficulty in drinking, clearing throat, coughing. He has difficulty in speaking, but he was able to speak. It was husky voice, and he took some rest. After 2-3 hours of rest, as he sat down on the dinner table for breakfast, family members noted that the patient has smaller eye on the right side. There is no history of headache, vomiting, or limb weakness. BP was 160/90, heart 82 regular, and fasting blood sugar was 126. So what is the likely diagnosis, Vaibhav?
So we have, from the history, we have a 61-year-old patient with a lot of vascular risk factors who has come with a sudden onset vertigo and with a lot of red flag signs that we could see in the history. So we are mostly dealing with a central vertigo. It's likely a posterior circulation stroke. And we can localize it to the medulla, brainstem.
Okay, medulla you said, no? Medial or lateral?
Lateral, sir.
Why?
We are dealing with the lateral part. Because, sir, in the medulla we have either the medial medullary syndrome or we have the lateral medullary syndrome.
Yes.
When we have a medial medullary syndrome, we have the involvement of the 12th nerve and we have the involvement of the pyramidal tract. So, a medullary involvement without the weakness in a patient points towards the lateral medullary syndrome. And there are actually a lot of other clues that we are getting from the history. Like the patient has a sudden onset vertigo. Along with that, patient is veering to the right side. That means there is an ataxia. And we have a clue from the history that there is a Horner syndrome, smaller pupil, that too on the right side. Again, that is one clue. And we are also getting the fact that the patient is also having a dysphagia and a nasal regurgitation. So the 5 Ds that you were mentioning about the ominous pentad,
yes.
we are actually getting those features from our history. So this is going in favor of a posterior circulation stroke, likely lateral medullary syndrome.
Lateral medulla, okay, that is very good interpretation. What bedside tests are supportive of the diagnosis, or maybe supportive? What bedside test we should do?
Bedside test, especially for the posterior circulation stroke, like the lateral medullary syndrome. One is the anisocoria, the Horner syndrome that
Horner
we can
syndrome
get,
you have mentioned,
that we are
okay.
getting. Second is, if we do the swallow test, the patient will not be able to swallow and there will be nasal regurgitation.
Okay.
Third point that we can get from the bedside, if we do a very meticulous examination, is presence of numbness or sensory loss on one side of the face and presence of sensory loss on the opposite side of the...
Which side of the face?
The face involvement would be on the right side,
Right side.
and there
Same
will
side.
be contralateral sensory loss in the upper limb and in the lower limb.
Yes.
So, a very important pearls and very important diagnostic tool for a bedside lateral medullary syndrome examination is someone with a vertigo, someone with a severe imbalance and less of weakness. And there is numbness on one side of the face and numbness on the opposite side of the body. So a facio, there is a sensory dissociation. That's a very much feature of a lateral medullary syndrome.
And that is a feature of the brainstem as a whole. The hallmark feature of brainstem stroke or brainstem involvement is that there is ipsilateral cranial with contralateral motor or sensory or extrapyramidal signs. These are the telltale features. Medial and lateral. Is there any suggestion how, say, for the general people, the audience, can we distinguish between medial and lateral in whole of the brainstem?
Mostly, sir, if we have a medial involvement, medial brainstem mostly has the motor fibers. So if you are having the motor involvement, then we are possibly dealing with a medial brainstem syndrome. But if we are dealing with more of a lateral syndrome, then we'll have a more of a sensory tract involvement rather than the motor involvement. And the motor cranial nerve nuclei are mostly situated to the medial aspect of the brainstem. So like the 12th nerve nuclei, if it is there, then it is mostly suggestive of a medial syndrome. But if the 12th nerve nuclei, that is the tongue involvement, is not there in a patient whom we are suspecting a posterior circulation stroke, that means we are dealing towards the lateral side of the brainstem.
And in pons and midbrain?
In pons and midbrain, if we are having the motor nuclei in the form of third nerve, so if we are having a ipsilateral third nerve palsy with a contralateral pyramidal tract involvement in the form of weakness or ataxia, then that is a feature of a medial midbrain syndrome. In the pons also we will have an involvement of the 6th and 7th nerve nuclei. That would give us more suggestion of the medial pontine syndrome.
Yes. There is something called rule of 4. I won't detail it, but for just a ready reference, 4 cranial nerves are situated medially, and they are 3, 4, 6 and 12. They are divisible by 12, so it is easy to remember. 3, 4, 6, 12. Medial and lateral, yes, said 4S, or all sensory fibers are mostly situated there, and other cranial nerves, apart from these 4. Very good. Number one, how to confirm?
So to confirm, we should be ordering a MRI brain stroke protocol, and we should be instructing our technician wherever we are suspecting a posterior circulation stroke to at least take a B1000 or a B2000 in a DWI so that we don't miss out on the smaller stroke, and there should be thin sections that should be taking at the brainstem level so that we don't miss out on the medullary syndrome. It is also even said that in the first 24 hours, our good clinical examination hints may even supersede the MRI.
Yes.
We might miss out on the changes on MRI. So the hints examination that we do at the bedside is such an important tool to discriminate between the peripheral and central. And if our suspicion is very high of a lateral medullary syndrome or a brainstem infarct, and we have missed out on the initial MRI, we should not hesitate to repeat the MRI after 40 to 72 hours.
Yes, agreed. So bedside test, and of course I forgot to mention, even the hints plus ABCD square, they may, if we do those bedside tests, it may the sensitivity, specificity goes high from 98 to 100%. So clinical is more important than MRI in this situation. Now, for our radiology colleague, Madam, I kept you last because, not because of gender bias, but because final words are always remembered more. So this is the 52-year-old male with progressive hearing loss of 2 years duration, unsteadiness, headache, there is no vomiting or limb weakness. He develops right-sided facial weakness 1.5 years down the lane. His family physician thinks it is Bell's palsy, prescribes the treatment for Bell's palsy, but he was fortunate that he ordered a CT scan of brain. Probably he was worried because the patient had sensory loss, hearing loss on the same side and developed Bell's palsy. So this is the CT scan. Before you interpret, I'll ask the audience, is there any abnormality? Is the scan normal or abnormal? Yes or no? A very tricky answer. You should be a politician. Normal dikh raha hai, but he hasn't said it is normal. Now, let Annapurna explain.
From the history, we can see there is involvement of both right 8th nerve and 7th nerve with a chronic history. So we can point out to involvement of right internal auditory meatus. So we'll focus our scan on right CP angle. In this CT scan, we can see an ill-defined mildly hyperdense mass lesion epicentered at right CP angle, causing mild compression over fourth ventricle
Yes,
as
this
well
is the
as
region.
adjoining basal
Yes.
cistern.
Yes, you go on. You
So
go on.
this points to presence of a right CP angle tumor. The differentials in this case could be acoustic schwannoma or meningioma. So we have to differentiate,
Between the two,
yeah.
which is more common?
Acoustic schwannoma is more common, and
Almost
also the history
80%.
points to
Yes,
involvement of
yes.
internal auditory
And
meters.
another feature is this dilatation of the pressure of the on the
On the
fourth
fourth
ventricle.
ventricle.
That also explains the patient has headache.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what will be the best modality for this patient?
Next, we'll do MRI of this patient, including a Fiesta sequence and contrast.
Contrast, okay. This is the MRI of the patient. Actually, it is not my case. I was sent this case by one of my colleagues from Durgapur, Dr. Praveen. But the telltale features are there. So please describe.
So this MRI shows a well-defined hyperintense mass lesion in right CP angle, infiltrating into right internal auditory meatus, as well as compressing over fourth ventricle, resulting in mild dilatation of supratentorial ventricles with presence of hyperintensity in periventricular white matter, suggesting the possibility of transependymal seepage, which could be a reason for headache of the patient.
And so the probable diagnosis is
My probable diagnosis is acoustic schwannoma.
vestibular schwannoma.
Yes, sir.
You said the other diagnosis may be differential
The next,
meningioma.
the next differential could be meningioma,
What do you expect? Do you expect this type of?
but in meningioma
Enhancement.
there is no extension into internal auditory canal.
Yes.
No ice cream cone appearance will
Okay.
be seen, and on post-contrast study we can see a dural tail sign, which will be absent in acoustic
Dural
schwannoma.
cancer. And there is a sign called mother-in-law sign.
So that
Mother-in-law
is seen
sign.
on
Meningioma.
yes, sir. In
Mother-in-law sign comes
sir.
early, stays late, and very dominant.
yes, sir.
That means if this is a heterogeneous enhancement, in meningioma there will be a uniform and dense enhancement. So that is how we.
And also meningioma will show presence of calcification, which is less
May
common
so,
in acoustic
may so.
schwannoma.
But if there is uniform enhancement,
Enhancement.
you may not pick up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any question from the audience? Any question regarding vertigo or the cases? Otherwise, we'll close. We are running late also. Is okay then? I close. I thank my panelist colleagues for their such wonderful explanation, and I thank the audience also for the participation, and of course the organizers for giving us this opportunity.